Wolfpack, we are thrilled to welcome on Thor Nystrom at ThorKu, KU. He is NBC Sports Edge's senior college football analyst, a legit college scout. Thor won the 2018 FSWA College Sports Writer of the Year award. That's not enough. He's been honored by Rolling Stone magazine, as well as the Best American Essay series. I'm so thrilled to welcome him back. It was a blast last year picking his brain. He's one of my go-to college football analysts, and now I get to dive into this 2020 rookie class with you. Thor, thanks so much for coming back on. How you doing today?
Dude, it's good to see you. It's good to be back. I'm doing well.
Awesome, man. And as I mentioned at the top, we'll be breaking down this 2020 rookie draft, and I'm going to kind of frame this by draft day decisions and dilemmas, kind of going from that top to bottom, a standard about 4-round rookie draft, get Thor's takes on some of those toughest decisions you guys might be facing. And the way I'll kind of break them down too is I'll give you where Thor has them ranked as well as their draft capital as I introduce the player. And starting right at the top is Bries Hall. He's kind of that 101 lock, it seems, in rookie drafts, going before everybody else. Thor, do you think that is exactly who belongs at the top of the draft? He was your running back one. What are your thoughts on Bries Hall?
Yeah, non-superflex leagues, I think that's fair for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to sort of market or corner the market share in New York. He's going to push out, unfortunately for Michael Carter, I think he's going to push him out. I think he's going to push everyone out. He's a 3-down guy. He's super versatile. He's certainly going to have the early down work, but I think he's also going to be getting all the passing down work. He's the bell cow that they've been looking for, and that's going to help out Zach Wilson. So yeah, I think he's the first pick. Yeah.
I know. I remember last time I had you on last year, you mentioned Michael Carter was maybe the best pass catching back of last year's class. Do you see this being? I mean, I love every time I hear bell cow, it just makes me just want to go crazy for fantasy football wise. Do you think there's any sort of committee here? Because Bries Hall is quite the receiver in his own right. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Carter could take some of the passing down work, but I think Hall is going to take most of it. Hall isn't. He could still use some work there. As far as route running, he's not super duper developed. Like at Iowa State, it was mostly just dump off stuff. And then he would run after the catch and break tackles and stuff like that. He's good at that. He doesn't drop any balls and he does break the tackles. He gets you yak yard and stuff like that. The other stuff he's going to have to develop as far as the route running and stuff like that. And then he gives effort as a pass blocker, but he's still improving and as far as that stuff goes. But like I said, I think Carter can steal a little bit of that work from him. But, I mean, who are we kidding here? I don't think Carter is going to, be the guy that they prefer in those situations initially to Hall. So I think it's just going to be Carter giving him a blow in some of those scenarios as opposed to being the guy that they prefer there.
Love to hear it. The 7th most targets among running backs were the Jets last year. 11th best line according to Pro Football Focus, and they didn't even have their main guy for most of it. So a lot of people are like, it's not the best offense. It's gross. I think it's a great spot, and I think he's definitely the guy I would go at 101 as well. Your Matt Forte comparison, love that, and maybe even a little faster there with that 4.33 speed. So great. Faster Matt Forte, sign me up all day.
Exactly, yeah.
Doesn't get much better than that. Next on the rookie draft list, he sometimes goes at 2, anywhere between 2 and usually by 7 is Kenneth Walker, the running back 2 on your big board among the backs, and typically ranked that way as well. Do you think because there's a lot of people saying because there's such a big gap between him and the next backs in this class, that he belongs all the way at number 2 in rookie drafts? There's also a great receiver class, especially at that top tier, that we're going to break down as well. So how do you approach Kenneth Walker? Do you think he belongs right after Bries Hall in terms of a rookie draft? Would you go receivers above him? And what do you see and what do you like about Kenneth Walker in general?
Yeah, that would be more of a coin flip for me. That one's a little bit closer. And really it's just because Kenneth Walker, there's not as much of a receiving utility. I thought it was funny that the Seahawks put out that video right away of Kenneth Walker catching that pass, at their rookie camp. It's like, the Seahawks were like, oh, look he could catch the ball. It's like, I know different. He didn't really do much of that in college. And Kenneth Walker is a guy who makes business decisions in pass pro. It's sort of the opposite of Bries Hall. Kenneth Walker does not want to pass protect. But he's one of the most special, just pure runners that we've seen come into the NFL in the last several years. That's his special sauce. So, he is going to, initially he is going to get the ball an F ton, just as far as a runner. So I think that, that's what the utility is there. As far as like apples to apples and fantasy drafts against one of the receivers, Drake London's going to get the ball a ton in year one. So I think that's where, probably the decision would be him against Drake London. But, I love Kenneth Walker a lot going forward. It's just how much is he going to give you, as far as a receiver? And I think that would come down to what's your league scoring, right? Like, is it a PPR league? Is it a non-PPR league? In a PPR league, Kenneth Walker is going to get hurt a little bit more just because, again, I just don't see him providing a ton as a receiver during his career.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point there. By the way, feel free to let any of the fuck bombs slip. This is a explicit pod. We always mark it as that. So you're welcome to let that slip anytime, for sure. Do you see, Rachaad Penny obviously had that monster stretch to the end of last year. Do you think this is a committee, or is Walker just that much better of a pure runner? I mean, the draft capital was certainly there where they trade up and got him. Like, what are your thoughts on, is this a committee at all, or how do you see the workload shaking out between those guys?
Rachaad Penny fucking sucks. I was way too excited to get out my first F-bomb.
There we go.
I've never been a Rachaad Penny fan. I do not see him as any impediment whatsoever to Kenneth Walker. And I think that the draft equity they sunk into Kenneth Walker would tell you that they love Kenneth Walker. I think it's sort of the same thing with that we were talking about with Michael Carter. I think Rachaad Penny is going to be the guy that gives him a blow, but I don't think he's going to be the guy that's stealing touches from him. I think Kenneth Walker is going to be the guy right away.
Love to hear it. Indeed. And we already have Pete Carroll talking about we need to get back to our roots and ground and pound it more. And he already has been one of the most run-heavy coaches, even with Russell Wilson under center. So now you're looking at it's going to be handoff after handoff. I would be shocked if they don't lead the league in rushing. I mean, maybe the Ravens will push for that too, but it's going to be a humongous ground pie. Even if there's a little bit of a division, Kenneth Walker could still approach you.
Well, especially with their quarterback play. I mean, my God, the fact that they're going to roll it forward with Drew Lock and then Geno Smith, it's fucking insane. I don't get it.
Disgusting. I don't either. We'll talk about your boy Malik Willis. I know you were so high on him, as was I. I love the player. I don't understand how they passed up on him as many times as they did, because that offense could be exciting as all hell. You put him back there. We'll get to that though when we get to quarterbacks, because I can't wait to hear your take on what happened with him, man. That's one of probably the biggest question I have in my mind about that draft and what happened there. But we are going in order of the actual draft picks. You mentioned Drake London would be kind of that, either him or Kenneth Walker, depending on your scoring, depending on your team needs as well for Dynasty. So I imagine if we're shaking out this top tier, Drake's kind of the clear guy for you. I had an assumption he was your wide receiver one coming into the draft. He's the first wide receiver off the board in the NFL draft. So what did you love about him, and how do you like this fit in Atlanta right now?
Yeah, he can do a whole lot of things. Like when you talk about his evaluation, a lot of the thing that you're talking about is the ball skills, the downfield utility, stuff like that. He's really big. He's really long. He can get up in the air. He has an enormous catch radius. And, he sort of has this catch radius of an Indian god. And if you get the ball within it, he's going to come down with it. And so, you have to keep a deep safety back, because no cornerback can go up one-on-one with him. But the other thing about him, it's not just that. Like USC, I think it was like he had like 2.5 screen catches per game. And beyond that, his yards per catch after the screens was really, really high. So it's like it's a guy who, both the deep game is there, also the short game, and then the intermediate stuff, he can do that as well. So it's like a golfer that's really good at putting, he's really good at driving, and he's really good at chipping. So you sort of had the fully fledged game there. I just sort of like everything about his game, and then. As far as the fit, it's the team sucks, but it's a really good fit for him, because it's it's this black hole of a receiving core, but you get to play with Kyle Pitts your entire career. And how awesome is that? Like, I was talking about the thing of like, you have to keep a deep safety back. You just have to, because if you don't, he's going to beat the cornerback one-on-one deep every single time. Well, it's the same thing with Kyle Pitts. So if you send both those guys deep on the opposite sides of the field, it's a pick your poison scenario for the defense. And if you're keeping two safeties back, now all of a sudden, Atlanta might be able to run, even though they don't have any running backs.
Yeah.
We'll see about that. I'm not a big fan of Tyler Algier. We can get back to that later, but I think it's a really good fit, and they're certainly going to pepper him with targets in year one because they don't have anybody else outside of Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, 100% agreement. I think that's kind of become the consensus for all the reasons you mentioned. The skill set, every single layer of the field, especially the contested catches, the Mike Evans comparisons, getting tossed out there, and it doesn't seem unrealistic at all to see a career parallel that. Yeah, the quarterback is definitely questionable. That's kind of what's the issue with a lot of these top guys as we sift through the rest of it is none of them landed with Pat Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers, and we'll talk about the two that did next question, but all the top talents, all the top ranked guys seem to get into these unideal situations as we break it down. But while we do, Wolfpack, if you haven't already, please consider hitting that thumbs up button, shares, likes, retweets, all that stuff does continue to help us grow and get this out to more people. So please consider doing that for us and helping us grow Wolfpack. It is so greatly appreciated as we welcome on Thor Nystrom of NBC Sports Edge. Now, continuing with that rest of the tier, we got Drake at the clear lock at the top. Seems to be what everybody's expecting. But what about Wilson, Olave, Jamison Williams, Treylon, Burks? They seem to be the consensus next four off the board. Between them, Walker, through pick 7, that's kind of it. You got your lock, Bries Hall. You got Kenneth Walker somewhere in there, and then these 5 receivers. So after Drake, how do you kind of rank Wilson, Olave, Jameson, and Burks?
Yeah, so Burks is the guy that I would have a little bit lower. His acclimation process, I will say, as far as the NFL fit, he got lucky that the team that took him, they traded AJ Brown. So at least he's going to get to play early. But as far as just the prospect, it's going to take him a little bit longer because in college, he was a forced manufactured touch guy close to the line of scrimmage. Sort of like in recent years, Rondale Moore, Laviska Shenault, guys like that, where they were by far the best, skill players on their team. And so their teams would move them around the formation, force them the ball within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, and then be like, you manufacture offense for us, as opposed to we're going to stick you in one spot and then develop you there. Right. And so now, going to the NFL, if Tennessee expects Treylon Burks to line up at one spot, the X, the Z, whatever it's going to be, and then, we expect you to be a standout at that one spot right away, I think they're going to be sorely mistaken. He also looked to be out of shape, initially at the rookie camp, which wasn't a great, thing right away. So I think he's going to start slow. Unfortunately, we'll see how that goes. Wilson, I think that could be okay right away. He's in a pretty good spot. I think that receiving core could be all right. You got Elijah Moore inside. You got the 5th pick on the other side from several years, Davis on the other side. Mm-hmm. And Wilson can run the routes really good. So I think, you got a field stretcher, you got your slot guy, that can create separation. And Wilson's one of the best guys in this class at creating separation. So I think that's a good fit for him. I'm a huge fan of Olave. He doesn't have the best quarterback situation of the kids that got drafted in this class, but you want to talk about a kid that creates separation. I mean, that kid creates separation like you and I breathe. He could lead the NFL in receptions, one of the years of his career, just because he creates separation so easily. So I was a huge fan of his game. I actually ranked him wide receiver 2 in this class. Yeah. I'm just a huge fan of his game. I ranked him 11th overall in the class. He ends up going 11th overall, in the draft. And then Jamison Williams, I'm not sure if he's going to start the season, coming off of that injury. I don't know if he'll be healthy week 1. We'll see. But certainly, once he starts playing, he's another guy that's going to get an F ton of targets, right? Because, of course they have Amon-Ra, but on the outside, what did the Lions have? They basically had nothing. So, Jared Goff is going to be looking Jamison Williams' way a whole lot once he gets onto the field. He just is. So, he's going to get a lot of targets. And then the other kid, Jahan Dotson. I was really interested just as far as the Commanders' strategy where you were sitting 11. We knew from the pre-draft process, all the reports coming out right before the draft, that there was going to be that wide receiver run. Every single, plugged-in reporter was reporting, there could be 4 receivers in the first, 12 or, all this different stuff. And it turned out it was like 6 of the first 18 and then, however many. Well, Washington was sitting right in there, right? They were sitting at 11.
Yeah.
They end up trading out of it. The team they trade with takes one of the consensus 4 top receivers. Washington trades out of the spot where they could have gotten one of the top 4. And then they basically trade right out of that slot. So now they're at 16 where they're out of the top 4 guys. They take Dotson, who is my wide receiver 5. I don't know if they saw him as, a part of, they didn't see it as a top 4. They saw it as a top 5 or what. I thought that was really weird. I didn't really get that at all. But if they see him, as sort of higher ilk than the rest of us, maybe he starts out a little bit quicker. The issue is, for me, why I dropped him a little bit lower, and I don't hate him. I ranked him 25th overall. You didn't get to see him do as much stuff down the field in college. He was another guy where he was forced a metric ton of touches closer to the line of scrimmage, in large part because of his college situation. Penn State had a quarterback who had a wet noodle arm. They had a terrible offensive line, and they didn't have any running, game whatsoever. Their running back stunk as well. So Jahan Dotson was their entire offense. Couldn't get the ball down the field, the quarterback, and even if he could, he didn't really have the time to throw the ball. Can Jahan Dotson win down the field? That I'm not sure of. He does have really, really good hands, and he is super duper sudden and super athletic. I'm just not sure if his game it's going to facilitate. He's not a big kid, so that I'm not sure of. But he can, closer onto the line of scrimmage, he can do that sort of stuff. He can create, the separation there, but not every receiver can win down the field, especially, the smaller receivers, stuff like that. But he is going to get the targets for sure, and he's going to start right away as well across from McLaren. So he's going to get targets as well. He's going to have fantasy utility right away as well.
It's an interesting thought about him because the draft capital is certainly there. He does have the 4.3 speed, so he could potentially burn if that comes out on the actual game speed too. And for all his faults, Carson Wentz did rank top half in the league on his deep passing accuracy. I couldn't believe it when I read that stat. It doesn't seem right, but that's what he was recorded by Pro Football Focus. So maybe that will unlock a level to his game we haven't seen. They've already talked about his interior route running. So that you suggest that like what you're getting at. He wins at the line. He wins inside. Nice little slot, could get peppered early and often. So for immediate productivity, he might be one of the better guys. It does bring up that debate now of the draft capital, first round guy, top 16 pick versus some of these other guys. Christian Watson landing with Aaron Rodgers, premier spot, top quarterback, as well as Skyy Moore going with Pat Mahomes, even though he fell to wide receiver 13. And you also got George Pickens, not quite the quarterback play of those other two, but he's certainly by the Steelers. You always want to take notice when the Steelers draft somebody. And those are typically the next 4 wide receivers off the board in fantasy drafts. Is it Dotson just because he was the first round receiver, or do you feel strongly about any of these other 4?
I would probably say Dotson. Yeah. But the other guys, I mean, like we have, as far as like fantasy propositions, this is a pretty good year to have dynasty picks. Like a lot of those guys, pretty attractive. Like I would want to have Christian Watson on my dynasty team. I would want to have Skyy Moore on my dynasty team, and I'd want to have George Pickens on my dynasty team. There was all those receivers getting taken for a reason, right? And a lot of them are in really good. A lot of them got in really good landing spots. It's funny. Like we'll just talk about Christian Watson, right? Like, and I like Christian Watson. I ranked Christian Watson as a first round prospect. I think I had him either 31 or 32 on my board. He ended up going, was it 33, 34?
I think 34, they traded up. Yeah.
34. Yeah. With my Vikings, that was a pretty shocking trade.
Right.
But so on the very first day in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, I was standing there with Eric Edholm, and we were of Yahoo Sports. We were looking down at the practice field, and Christian Watson came out, and we were both talking about how we were like super pumped to watch him because we'd seen him on film. He doing all the deep stuff with Treylon, stuff like that, and we'd seen him blocking his butt off too. We'd seen him doing the running, some of the running stuff, like the end around stuff. And then they bring him into the backfield and stuff like that. You'd seen all these sort of disparate, really interesting things of his game. But like, you were still wondering, like, trying to put it together in your head of like, sort of what was the full package of his evaluation. But, he's this 6'4" kid that, 6'4", 210 that you thought was going to run in the 4.4s, maybe even the 4.3s, sort of reports, stuff like that. And Ed Holm turns to me and he goes, doesn't Watson look like a kid who came off the conveyor belt as a Green Bay Packer receiver?
Wow.
And I was like, he sure does. And it's so funny that he goes through the process and it ends up that he ends up on the Green Bay Packers and that they targeted him like that. And they targeted him as a replacement for Valdez-Scantling, who was another guy that came off the conveyor belt as a Green Bay Packer receiver, although, certainly further down the phylum. Christian Watson was sort of like Marcus Valdez-Scantling, but he fell into a radioactive vat, like a goo, and came out like, like a Monstar version or whatever. He can do so many more things than Valdez-Scantling, but it's sort of the same physical package, but just, way better, just and more refined skills or whatever. You have the deep ball utility, but again, you're going to be able to do this stuff like you could bring him into the backfield if you want. You can do the trick stuff with him. You can bring, the end around stuff like that. I also think he's going to be better, running routes, the intermediate stuff, the more fleshed out route tree than people think initially. That was the thing that we were looking for in Mobile, just because we hadn't seen as much of it on tape, just because of the constitution of the NDSU offense. You didn't run as many routes in the intermediate sector. It was more the deep stuff or the running stuff. But in Mobile, he had a really good rapport with Kenny Pickett. And so we saw him against zone coverage, working around traffic, finding the soft spots, turning around, making himself available, and catching the ball, picking around traffic, stuff like that. So I'm not concerned about that part of his game. And I think he's going to play early, and I think he's going to get targets early. He was another guy, of course, that found a receiving core that doesn't really have anyone. So and he, is his game fully fledged out right now? Is he at his ceiling? No, but he has special sauce things already, right? Like the fact that he's 6'4", 210, runs in the 4.3s, and is really, really good downfield, that's going to play for the Packers right away. The fact that he blocks his fucking ass off, that's going to play for the Packers right away. The fact that he can do the end around shit, the fact that you can bring him into the backfield, that's going to play right away. The intermediate stuff, like that stuff, like he's still working on it, but he's already flashing with it. Like you can still, you can work with that stuff. He's not falling on his face with it right now. So at least it's playable. So he can get on the field right now. So I think he's playable right now.
I was going to say, because, you mentioned a lot of these guys did end up with pretty wide open target situations, but not all of them landed with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. Right. And that could either be the boon and make him just blow up. A lot of the dynasty concern from folks right now is he is a little raw, and Aaron Rodgers, leans on the guys he trusts, and he's going to shun him if he runs the wrong route or isn't there. Are you worried about that at all? Or did you see enough that you think this kid could just hit the ground running with Rodgers and potentially who is it? Lazard and Randall Cobb's corpse. And like, there's nobody to throw to. If Watson has it and he's got that rapport, he could walk right into 120 targets from Rodgers. So what do you think of that kind of duo? Do you think it will work out?
Look, I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan. I hate Aaron Rodgers with all of my soul. Aaron Rodgers, I think, is a fucking douchebag, but he's not an idiot.
100% agree.
He is not an idiot. And once he gets on the field with Christian Watson and he compares him to his other options, he is not going to be asking for Christian Watson to be off the field. In fact, it's going to be the opposite. Christian Watson is so much more talented than all the other options that he has. And again, just the deep field utility alone is going to have Aaron Rodgers begging to have Christian Watson on the field. Period. Like you remember the years where like Richard Rodgers and shit like that, like exactly. They're gonna have Christian Watson on the field right away, 100%. I don't know how many targets he's gonna get, but he's gonna be playing and I think starting right away.
I love to hear it. I mean, I originally, between him and Jahan Dotson, I liked the player and the capital of Dotson, but that Aaron Rodgers just juice had me a little higher on Watson on my big board. Now I feel even more firmly if I'm drafting right there at 6, 7, 8. I mean, he's almost creeping up to the other guys now for me. The more you talk about him here in terms of the Olave, Jameson, just because of the situation, the landing spot. I probably won't. I don't want to overvalue landing spot too much, but that has me on these four names, the Watson, Moore, Dotson, Pickens. I've got Watson. I already had Watson, and now I'm locking him in at this point. But what about Moore? I know he fell a little bit. Wide receiver 13 off the board. I believe you had him at wide receiver 8, so pretty high ranked going into it. He does land with Mahomes. Unlike Watson, there is Kelsey already there, but otherwise the wide receiver core is still, Juju's the best potential option there. Maybe McCole Hardman has a year, or I don't know. It seems like a pretty wide open receiver core behind Kelsey. So do you see a role for Moore early on, or is it just a bunch of slot guys that's going to be tricky to separate from?
Yeah, that one's it's a bit more of a quagmire, and Moore is he had it wasn't a tricky evaluation, but it was it was less straightforward with him than it was with Watson, because Watson he's what he did at NDSU, he's going to do the same shit in the NFL. It's like it's the 6'4", 210 pop the top guy on the outside. Like it's like, it's the same thing. It's an analog. It's a 1-to-1 translation to the NFL. Whereas with Skyy Moore, he's a little bit less than 5'10", 191, and in the MAC he was an outside boundary receiver, which he's not going to be in the NFL probably. I mean, what we'll see about that. I mean, the Chiefs might feel a little bit different, and I did comp him to Doug Baldwin because I don't think it's out of the question that he could play some outside receiver in the NFL. But I do think he's probably headed towards the slot. He did cook everyone in the match. He was facing cornerback ones every single time. Was drawing the top cornerback from the opposing team every single time. Cooked every single one on the outside, but is probably going to be transitioning to the inside. That's going to be a little. It's not just you go inside. It's the easiest transition ever. Although he did play a little bit of slot. In the MAC, but you're going to the NFL. You're jumping up from the MAC to the NFL. Now you're going to be going to the slot full time. And now the Chiefs have this situation, like you mentioned, where they have all these different guys. Some of them are new, so they're going to be figuring out all this different stuff. But Skyy Moore is very, very talented. So he is going to be factoring into whatever the plan is immediately. What you like about him, very sudden off the line. The footwork is awesome off the line. You can't stop him off the line. That's why he was so good on the outside, even at his size. The releases off the line are just special. It's, despite the size, you're not getting your hands off him and stopping them there. And then he just creates separation really good. And despite the size, despite his smaller catch radius, he has really good ball skills. So he's creating the separation, creating the throwing windows for the quarterback, and then he's going to come down with the ball. Caleb Ellaby, his quarterback, he had a decent arm, but he wasn't the most accurate guy in the world. But Skyy Moore created so many opportunities for him and then came down with the ball all the time. So he was like a godsend for Caleb Ellaby. I do expect him to get on the field right away, but the Chiefs have so much going on in that reconstituted thing. It's, for me, that's not quite as clear as the Christian Watson thing.
Yeah, gotcha. Good clarity coming here from Thor, again, at Thor Koo, if you're following along. Now, as you move through the rookie draft, this has kind of become, whether we agree or not, the next few guys, especially towards the end of round one, James Cook and Rachaad White, that fantasy owners are looking at in these rookie drafts. Certainly from the running back position, they've kind of taken over that running back 3, running back 4 in early fantasy drafts. A lot of, obviously, because of the pass catching prowess in PPR leagues and all that. This has become a pretty popular debate amongst dynasty leaguers, is which one deserves to go first, Cook or White. Do you have a firm stance on which one you prefer between those two?
I'd probably take Cook. Yeah, I'd probably take Cook. Just because, yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, first of all, I think Cook is Cook doesn't have quite the well, I don't know. I think he'll probably get the more touches. Tampa Bay, Buffalo. Well, you're sort of extrapolating like the team's intentions with this, but Buffalo, like I think that they're going to be putting. I guess I would assume that they're going to be putting Cook on the field a little bit more. Devin Singletary. It's interesting because Singletary can catch the ball. And I suppose Moss can just a little bit, but those guys are limited in their own ways. Whereas with Tampa Bay, Lenny Fournette's going to get the early down work. Whereas I could see a scenario where even James Cook could even potentially get some of the early down work for Buffalo. Whereas there's no chance that Rachaad White gets the early down work early for Tampa Bay. So I guess that's why I would lean that way for James Cook. I think he's going to get the most touches in year one.
Yeah, they've already talked about him, like mentioning him as a sub back, but they also said he could easily factor into those early downs. James Cook in Buffalo, Bradley Beane was saying there, the GM in their post-game call said, yeah, I mean, Buffalo offense, they certainly, Singletary number 2 running back in fantasy for those last 5 weeks in fantasy playoffs, but it doesn't seem anything special to me. So I'm with you there. His path to playing time, Cook, seems a lot clearer to me. And as a player, I mean, I know you had Cook higher at running back 5 versus White at running back 7 too. So talent seems to be a little bit higher there. A guy that you had at running back 4, and a lot of people are starting to fall in love with because he seems to be in an open path to volumes, Damian Pierce. The guy you had at 3, who I had at 3, who a lot of us had at 3, Isaiah Spiller, ended up falling all the way to running back 9 in the draft. So he's starting to fall in rookie drafts because of the draft capital, although I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, given Chargers quite an offense to land and not much ahead of him other than Eckler. And then Brian Robinson also kind of rounding out the running backs you see going in round 2. Do you think between Pierce going to Houston, Spiller and the Chargers, and Robinson with the football team, or any other names that you toss into there, what do you think of those 3? Do you have a personal favorite of them?
Yes, Pierce. Pierce is the guy that I'd be like the Jim Cramer hitting the bye or whatever button. Pierce, just because first of all, I like Pierce as a player, and he with Pierce he can be on the field all the time. But the other thing is, it's such a perfect landing spot because Houston sucks, and the running back room is another one of those hollowed out crater things. They could really use a 3-down back next to Davis Mills. Damian Pierce, and a part of this is again a context of the situation of the player in discussion. Where he came from last year, Florida was a flaming dumpster fire. And then the coach, Dan Mullen, was an effing idiot. Dan Mullen, going back years, has always done these running back rotations. When Damian Pierce, when he went into college, that was good news for him. Right away, he got to be a part of the rotation. But last year, when Damian Pierce was clearly the best running back, was bad news because then the guys lower than him, which weren't nearly as good, they were cutting into his timeshare when they should not have been. Damian Pierce only had like 100 touches last year when he should have had way, way more than that. And I looked into a bunch of his different stats. You guys can look it up on like my running back rankings, like the scouting reports if you want. But like out of his 100 touches, it was something like 35 of them came against stacked boxes. And he had some ludicrous amount of broken tackles like within them, ludicrous amount of touchdowns within them. And then, the passing down utility is really, really good with him. Really good receiving back. And then he's one of the best pass blocking backs in this class as well. So he's going to be able to play right away. He breaks a bunch of tackles, like I mentioned. I think I comped him to David Montgomery. I see his utility as extremely analogous to David Montgomery, and then he can do the same stuff coming in right away. The same stuff that David Montgomery did right away for the Bears. I think you can imagine the same thing with Pierce. I think he's going to start really quickly for the Texans. And as far as a fantasy thing, I think he's going to be the surprise back this year.
Nice. So that Eli Mitchell type of guy that just kind of blows up onto the scene.
1,000%. Yeah. Okay. It's a situation thing. And again, an NFL situation, it's a confluence of two things. The NFL situation was perfect that he got into. And then the context of his last situation is the reason why people are undervaluing him coming into the NFL.
Love it. Love all that. So, sounds a little bit like Alvin Kamara in that sense. I know not the same player at all, but was underutilized and kind of undervalued because of it. And once he got the usage, lit it up in that sense. 1,000%. 1,000%. Interesting. Maybe I got to bump this guy up. I don't have him too low. I have him a little bit below Spiller, but the volume is certainly there for the taking. So I
bump him above Spiller.
Okay.
For fantasy. Yeah.
I love it. Excellent take there. Now moving into the round 2 receivers, that's where we had, Amon-Ra St. Brown blow up, fell into most rookie round 2s last year. Some interesting names going in that area is David Bell going to the Browns, Deshaun Watson probably. Who knows how long, but we'll see. That ends up being he was the wide receiver 15 in your rankings, wide receiver 16 off the board. Alec Pierce, your wide receiver 11, was the wide receiver 12 going to the Colts. We got John Mechie, who you were a little bit lower on, wide receiver 18, became the wide receiver 9 going over to Houston. Tolbert's also coming off the board in that range, wide receiver 10 in your rankings, wide receiver 15. Great spot to the Cowboys. And last but not least, another round 2 wide receiver, Wandel Robinson. Your wide receiver 12 was the 8th receiver off the board going to the Giants. So I know it's a lot of names to toss at you, but does one stand out to you as your favorite of these round 2 receivers to maybe be that next Amon-Ra or type of blow up in round 2?
Well, I like David Bell enough. I'm not going to say like blow up, but maybe in the same, like Amon-Ra, he's not like a star. So maybe in the same sort of a way, like David Bell he's going to be a solid possession guy. Like his ceiling is capped, but like I could see him being I shouldn't say the same guy as he was in college, but like he's going to be a solid possession guy in the NFL. He's just not going to be a star. He's a well-built guy. He has great ball skills and he runs really good routes. He also knows how to use his body. The only problem with him, it's the limited athletic profile thing.
Yeah.
And you can see that on film. I mean, like it was not a surprise to anybody that he tested poorly. In fact, it's sort of the opposite where like most of us like to do this. We're big fans of David Bell. Like we loved watching him like every Saturday. And we were like crossing our fingers that he was going to test better. We had to rank him lower because of the testing. You can't rank a guy that tests like that, like as a second round guy or a first round guy. You just can't. So I had to bump him down, and he ends up going around where I had him or whatever. But that being said, I do think he's going to be a solid possession guy in the NFL. And he ends up going to a really good spot, I think, right? Like it's a team that not only has a true number 1 receiver, it also has the super athletic guy that can pop the top in deep
Peoples Jones over there. Yeah.
I was trying to do the acronym and I couldn't get it out. So you got those 2 guys, and then you also have the good quarterback. You also have the assuming he plays, and then you also have the good running game. And so you talk about a good scenario for David Bell in college at Purdue when he wasn't playing with Rondale Moore, which happened a lot, especially last year. Rondale Moore wasn't there, but also when Rondale was banged up a lot, so they didn't actually see the field a lot together. But when they weren't, defenses could shade at David Bell, and so you could see double coverage, which obviously wasn't great for him. He's never going to see double coverage in the NFL. Like that's one of the good things for him going forward. He's not explosive enough to garner that sort of attention against single coverage and against the number 2 or number 3 cornerback of the NFL team. It's a very good scenario for him. That is going to play up his possession ethos. He's not going to put up the enormous yardage numbers, et cetera, but could he catch a bunch of balls in the NFL and start right away? Yeah, I think he could. So, I mean, that's a guy I would keep an eye on. Again, is he ever going to star in the NFL? No. But could he play right away and catch a bunch of balls? Yeah, I think he probably could. So that would be a guy that would interest me. Tolbert's a good player. I mean, Tolbert's he's a pop the top guy. I comped him to Gabriel Davis. It's sort of, an analogous, like you saw Gabriel Davis in that playoff game. It's sort of the same thing where it's like, that's what he does. It's get down the field and catch the ball deep or force the defense to keep guys back, right? Like it's just sort of the same sort of a deal. So you mentioned it was a pretty good landing spot for him. I think that was a good spot. I'm a big fan of Wandel Robinson. My only concern with him, it was the smaller catch radius. I actually ranked Wandel as wide receiver 10 earlier in the process. And then I was like looking at the historical catch radius numbers and like, there were so few guys that had the catch radius of Wandale that had succeeded in the NFL that like I was like crunching the analytics on it and like I think I overthought it, and so I bumped him down to 12. Like I sort of whatever, and he ends up going a little bit above that or whatever. But on film, I love the kid. Every time I watch Wandale Robinson, he was smoking people. Like I'm a huge Iowa Hawkeye fan. He cooked Iowa every time he played him. But the year before, this past year, it was with Nebraska. He destroyed Iowa. And then this past season, it was with Kentucky. He was the only reason that Kentucky beat Iowa in the bowl game. So I actually hate Wandale Robinson because he killed my teams every single year. He is one hell of a player. He is so much better than, for instance, the kid they took in the first round, Tony. They're not the same kind of player because Wandale Robinson can run routes and win in the intermediate area and even downfield a little bit, whereas Kadarius Toney categorically cannot. Kadarius Toney is no impediment whatsoever to Wandale Robinson. Wandale Robinson is a better player. As far as John Mechie, the reason I'm lower on him is he is a non-explosive, small slot receiver who is coming off an ACL injury. Now he is reliable. He has good hands and he runs good routes. And he's going to, a receiving core where ostensibly he's going to be playing early. Nick Saban loves him. I think that's the reason why, more or less, why the NFL was super high on him, because Nick Saban, is like Nick Saban spoke higher of John Mechie than he spoke just about damn near anyone. But again, like the way that I see, it's sort of like basketball positions when you think about like receiver, like the different receiver spots or whatever. For my slot guy, I want an explosive guy there. And if I can't have an explosive guy there that can do different things, can stretch the defense different ways, then I would prefer the big slot, right? Mechie's not either of them. He's not a big guy, and he's not the guy that can stretch you either way. He's the small guy that's sort of like the efficiency type slot. And also, again, he's coming off the injury. We didn't get to see him during the pre-draft testing. So that's sort of why I'm out on him.
Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. All makes sense. Love it all. Did you have, out of all those names, was your favorite Bell, or did you, like, if you had to pick one of them, who do you like out of them? Wandale, Bell, Alec Pierce, Mechie, Tolbert. Like, if you're drafting a fantasy draft,
I would
dynasty league. Yeah.
Definitely as a prospect, Wandale. The only reason I'm hedging is just because of fantasy, because he might not be in the best. I'll say Wandale backed up by David Bell.
Gotcha. And I do want to ask you before we let you go about Willis and the quarterback position, how you approach it. But the last like non-quarterback I wanted to just quickly mention is Trey McBride. I mean, obviously the tight end one on your board, and pretty much everybody's entering it. He goes to Arizona, definitely a pass-happy offense here. How early do you think is too early to draft this guy compared to some of these names we've been talking about? Does he stack up below them? Would he stack up ahead of them? If you were drafting your rookie dynasty draft, where are you targeting Trey McBride?
Oh man. Probably be, man, I don't know. Where has he been going? I haven't even done one yet.
Typically in like the middle of round 2, kind of around the receivers, the Bells, the Wandales, the Damian Pierces. Like, he doesn't usually go round 1, but kind of in that mid round 2 to end of round 2 is where you see him.
I would definitely have him behind Pierce. I would definitely have him behind. I would have him behind Bell. I would have him behind Wandale. I'd probably have him above Pierce, though. I would have him above like Tyquan Thornton and like some of those guys.
Yeah.
I'd have him above Mechie. That some people would probably find that scandalous, but that's probably where I'd have him. Like, I do think he's going to get on the field a little bit early on, but like they have Ertz, yeah. But like McBride, he's super versatile, where like he can play, inline, he can play in the slot, he can be H-back. So like I do think they can get him on the field just a bit, even if it's in conjunction with Ertz early on. Certainly, in 2023 and going forward, you're going to see him on the field more. I think that would be the utility. But yeah, I think probably like mid to late second round, maybe, like in my hedgers ballparking it probably.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of where he's going. That's kind of where I have him too. But certainly if you can sustain that early development, that's typically the case for rookie tight ends if you're not Kyle Pitts. We saw Ertz see the 4th most targets among tight ends last year. Free agent next year, going to probably be out of there. And this big athletic freak is potentially the number 1 guy starting in that role. I could see him as early as next year being like a top 7 tight end in fantasy. So if you can play that long tail game, I'm all in on him. But yeah, if we wrap up here, I know we're right on the time here, but I want to hear quickly, if you don't mind, your take on what happened to Willis and kind of what's your approach to the quarterbacks in this class? Because you had Pickett, believe it, quarterback 4 or 5, if I'm looking at it right here. Quarterback 4. He ended up going the only first-round quarterback, really the only one starting and looking like a starter as a year 1 guy. And Willis, the guy as my number 1 quarterback entering the draft. No idea what happened to him. Kind of what's your take? What happened here?
Yeah, I'm still stunned about what happened to Malik Willis. And nobody really has explained it to me adequately. Like the NFL didn't expect it to happen. This is self-apparent because Malik Willis would not have been in the green room if they could have, right? Like they wouldn't have brought him there if they didn't think he was going to go in the first round. By the way, if Kenny Pickett had gone above 20, I think Malik Willis would have been the 20th pick. So it's some of this stuff is just sliding doors. Some of it's just circumstantial and stuff like that. And one thing happens and then all of a sudden the stuff starts going one way and whatnot. And stuff ends up happening. But like the way that I see Malik Willis, it has not changed. My take on that prospect, it remains the exact same. I think that the Titans got one of the great steals that I've seen in the draft. And I think he is going to be great in the NFL. Now, what I said in the pre-draft process, it still stands. And I think this is the one thing that you can explain for the reason that he dropped. He has to sit in year one. That just is the case. There's a risk aversion in the NFL. And the other thing, where the difference between my job and people picking in the NFL is when you're picking in the NFL, you want to succeed, right? Like your job is dependent on, like this coming year, right? Like the short term or whatever. Sometimes you don't want to have to wait for a guy or whatever because your job might be on the line. Whereas mine's not. Like it's easy for me to say like, oh, take him because he's gonna, if he just learns to read the quarters, coverage or whatever, he's gonna be a star after that. So that's a part of it. But like Malik Willis found the absolute perfect situation, right? Sit behind Tannehill for a year, learn how to read the quarter coverage, stuff like that. And then after that, you have this perfect situation where it's, you got Derrick Henry, you have this fully fleshed out wide receiver core already around you. You have a really good organization. It's a really, really good situation. But yeah, he does have stuff to learn. There's also stuff with the footwork and the technique and stuff like that. But just as far as the physical tool set, it's absolutely ridiculous. You just don't see guys that have the arm strength that he does, the athleticism that he has, and stuff like that come into the draft. You just don't.
Michael Vick comp. I mean, that's pretty hardy right there. And Michael Vick wasn't long ago where he was just a fantasy cheat code. So Willis falling very far in rookie drafts now. People think, he's ever going to play all that. I think he's definitely one of those guys. If you have a decent quarterback core and you can wait 1-2 years, especially the way you're saying, like could be a cheat code, especially getting him round 3 in rookie drafts now type of take him.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. The fact that people are out on him, I would be grabbing him in every single fantasy draft that I possibly could. I'd take the gift. And what risk do you have in the 3rd round? I mean, people trade 3rd round dynasty, picks like they're 6th round NFL draft picks, like they're nothing. Like take Malik Willis in the 3rd. If he doesn't pan out, who cares? But like if he does, again, you have a cheat code going for it, or especially if it's like a super flex league, grab him in every single draft that you possibly can.
Love it. Love the take. Love all the takes, Thor. This was such a blast being able to catch up with you here and your takes on some of the most crucial rookie draft day decisions. Do you mind just letting our listeners one more time know where to find your work and anything you'd like to promote?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at ThorKU, and you can find my professional work at NBC Sports Edge.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much for being so generous with your time. Really appreciate having you on again. It's always a blast.
Appreciate you, brother. Good seeing you again.
Good to see you too. All righty, we'll pack, and we'll now hit the mailbag for you. So take Thor out. Thanks again, Thor. Really appreciate the time, brother. We'll hit the mailbag, but really always one of the best interviews. One of my favorite rookie analysts, college football analysts that you could possibly ask for. So thanks again for all the time. Thank you, Wolfpack, for tuning in. Tunes asked for thoughts on Cade Otton, and I know Thor had him as tight end too. If Gronk's not back, man, that could be an intriguing player for sure. So keep that one on the record. Hey, Jeremiah. Hey, Ian. Good to see you, man. Thanks for tuning in. Man, awesome stuff as always from Thor. So Wolfpack, if you enjoyed the show and you haven't already subscribed, please consider joining us over on YouTube and over on Facebook, wherever you prefer watching your videos. We're on both. You can find us at Rose Street Journal. Consider subscribing, joining the Wolfpack. We're going to have some great rookie interviews lined up. Scott Barrett coming on soon, hoping to get Danny Kelly over at the Ringer. So lots of good rookie content. And then, of course, as you long-term listeners know, we got the Fantasy Wolves series coming this summer, as we always do. Big guns like Evan Silva. Again, Scott Barrett will probably come out again because he's the man. Ian Hartitz, some of the legends will be returning. We're trying to stack it with even more great guests. So please consider subscribing if you like this fantasy content. You can find all the written content over at rotostreetjournal.com, where we breed and feed fantasy wolves. Got a big board for rookies, got a big board for redraft, dynasty. I got to update this weekend, but all your content you need, the Roto Street Journal Stock Watch, everything is there to help you dominate and pave your path to 2022 titles. And of course, the Fantasy Fullback Dive is the podcast form of this. If you do like listening to podcasts and prefer that, you can find us on Apple, iTunes, wherever you listen to podcasts, we'll be there for you. Thanks again so much for tuning in. And in a world full of fantasy sheep, guys, be the wolf. Later.